Blanc was supposed to be a sanctuary, the kind of place where crystal glasses tinkle softly against bone china, where whispered conversations float like gentle music across white tablecloths, and where even celebrities can disappear into the quiet sophistication of a perfect meal. But on this particular evening, the peace shattered like a champagne flute hitting marble floors. A girl's quiet sob cut through the refined atmosphere, followed by the harsh scraping of chairs as diners turned to stare. Through the maze of elegant tables, a teenager in simple jeans and a hoodie was being escorted toward the exit, her shoulders hunched, her face hidden beneath a curtain of dark curls. "You don't belong here," the waiter had said, his voice dripping with barely concealed disdain. "There are more appropriate establishments down the street." The words hung in the air like poison, their true meaning clear to everyone who watched the scene unfold. Then, from somewhere in the dining room, a phone's screen lit up with breaking news. A gasp, a whispered name that spread from table to table like wildfire. "That's Maya Bennett, the Maya Bennett." The same Maya Bennett whose voice had been playing on repeat on every radio station that morning, whose latest single had just hit 1 billion streams, whose face would grace Madison Square Garden on a sold-out billboard next week. But in that moment, she wasn't a global sensation or the youngest artist ever to sweep the Grammys. She was just a black teenager being shown the door of yet another place that decided her appearance didn't meet their standards. As she reached the entrance, Maya finally lifted her head. A single tear traced down her cheek, but her eyes, those eyes that had captivated millions, held something far more powerful than sadness. They held a truth that would shake this prestigious restaurant to its very foundation, and spark a conversation that no one in its hallowed halls could ignore any longer. This isn't just a story about a case of mistaken identity. This is a story about who we are, who we think we see when we look at others, and what happens when our biases collide with reality in ways we can no longer deny. 24 hours earlier, Maya Bennett stood in her father's kitchen, barefoot and laughing as she attempted to flip pancakes. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, a stark contrast to the sleek styles her team of professionals usually created for her appearances. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of her world tour, Authenticity, ironically named for the very thing she struggled to maintain in her whirlwind life. At 17, she had already achieved what most artists spent lifetimes pursuing. 5 platinum singles, 3 sold-out international tours, and a fan base that numbered in the millions. "Baby girl, you're burning the edges again," James Bennett chuckled, reaching around his daughter to adjust the stove's heat. A retired music teacher, he had been Maya's anchor since she was discovered singing in a viral video at 12. While the world saw Maya Bennett, the sensation who could make stadiums roar with a single note, James still saw his little girl, who used to perform impromptu concerts in their living room, using a hairbrush as a microphone. "Dad, I've mastered 3 different choreographies this week. I think I can handle pancakes," Maya protested, though her smile betrayed her amusement. The kitchen was their sanctuary, the one place where she could shed the weight of being Maya Bennett, the star, and just be Maya, James's daughter who still couldn't cook to save her life. Her phone buzzed incessantly on the counter, her manager, her publicist, her choreographer, all demanding attention. The numbers for her latest single, Raw, were breaking records. The tour was projected to gross 9 figures. The brand deals were piling up. But here, in this moment, Maya was focused on the simple task of making breakfast with her father, trying to hold on to these precious moments of normalcy. "You know, Dad," she said, finally giving up on the pancake and turning to face him, "sometimes I wonder what it would be like to just walk into a place where nobody knows me, to just be another face in the crowd." She paused, her expression thoughtful. "Remember when we used to go to that little diner in Brooklyn? Before everything?" James's expression softened, understanding the weight behind her words. "You're still that same girl, Maya. Fame doesn't change who you are inside." He squeezed her shoulder gently. but maybe you need to remind yourself of that sometimes. Maya's gaze drifted to the window, where a small group of paparazzi had already gathered for the day. Their cameras were ever present, hungry for any glimpse of her life. "Tomorrow it all starts again," she said quietly. "The tour, the cameras, the countless faces in the crowd. Sometimes I feel like I'm living in a glass box where everyone can see me, but nobody really sees me." Little did Maya know that her wish to be unseen, to experience a moment of anonymity, would come true in the most unexpected and painful way. Le Blanc restaurant, with its pristine reputation and hidden prejudices, was about to become the stage for a very different kind of performance. One that would force not just Maya, but an entire community to confront uncomfortable truths about perception, privilege, and the masks we all wear. Le Blanc stood as a monument to old money and older traditions in the heart of Manhattan's Upper East Side. Its cream-colored walls had witnessed countless business deals, marriage proposals, and celebrations of the city's elite for over 5 decades. Marcus Weber, the restaurant's head waiter for the past 15 years, took immense pride in maintaining what he called the establishment's standards. His perfectly pressed uniform and meticulously groomed appearance matched the restaurant's reputation for excellence. That morning, Marcus had arrived early, as usual, to oversee the preparation of the dining room. He moved through the space with practiced precision, adjusting a chair angle here, straightening a tablecloth there. Every surface gleamed, every glass sparkled. Le Blanc had recently received yet another prestigious award, and Marcus felt personally responsible for upholding its image. "Remember," he instructed the newer staff during their morning briefing, "Le Blanc isn't just a restaurant, it's an institution. Our clientele expects a certain ambiance." The pause in his words carried unspoken implications, ones that had manifested in subtle ways over the years. The occasional fully booked response to certain callers, despite empty tables, the dress code violations that seemed to be enforced more strictly for some guests than others, the preferred seating that invariably meant less visible tables for guests who didn't fit the establishment's unwritten profile. The staff nodded, some shifting uncomfortably, others accepting these unofficial policies as simply the way things were done. None questioned the underlying messages in Marcus's carefully worded instructions. After all, Le Blanc's reputation spoke for itself. Their tables were booked months in advance, their reviews glowed with praise, and their wealthy regulars kept coming back. What Marcus and the staff didn't realize was that today, their carefully maintained world of exclusive dining was about to collide with a force that would shake its very foundation. Maya Bennett's wish for anonymity was about to be granted, but the price of that wish would challenge everything Le Blanc stood for and force its guardians to confront the ugly truth behind their polished facade. The evening sun cast long shadows through Le Blanc's vast windows when Maya walked in. She had deliberately chosen a simple outfit, worn jeans, white sneakers, and an oversized hoodie, her armor against the world when she wanted to disappear. No makeup, no stylist-approved wardrobe, no security detail. Just a teenager seeking a quiet dinner before her life would once again become a whirlwind of stages, screens, and screaming fans. The maitre d' was occupied with a phone call when Maya approached the podium, her hands tucked into her hoodie pockets. Marcus, ever vigilant, noticed her immediately. His eyes narrowed as they traveled from her casual attire to her unadorned face, then to her sneakers that whispered against the pristine marble floors. He intercepted her before she reached the podium. "Can I help you?" The words came out clipped, professional but cold. Maya smiled, accustomed to warming even the chilliest receptions with her natural warmth. "Yes, I have a reservation for 7 o'clock. Under Bennett?" Her voice was soft, intentionally quiet after years of learning to moderate the power it held. Marcus didn't bother checking the reservation book. "I'm afraid there must be some mistake. We are fully committed this evening." His gaze flickered meaningfully to a clearly empty section of tables behind her. "But I made this reservation weeks ago," Maya persisted, reaching for her phone. "I can show you the confirmation." "Perhaps," Marcus interrupted, taking a step closer, his voice lowering to ensure only she could hear. "You might be more comfortable at one of the establishments downtown. We maintain certain standards here at Blanc, you understand." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She had heard variations of this before, at boutiques, at hotels, at restaurants, but never quite so blatantly, never with such thinly veiled contempt. She felt her chest tighten, years of practiced poise warring with the raw hurt of the moment. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely a whisper now. "What standards exactly am I not meeting?" A couple at a nearby table had stopped eating, their forks suspended in midair, as they watched the scene unfold. Other diners began to take notice, their conversations dying down to curious murmurs. "Please," Marcus said, his patience visibly wearing thin. "Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone who doesn't meet our dress code or—" he paused, his meaning crystal clear, "fit our establishment's image." Maya felt the familiar sting of tears threatening to fall, but years of public scrutiny had taught her to hold them back. She stood straighter, summoning the strength that had carried her through countless performances. "Your image, I see." Her voice trembled slightly. "And what image is that exactly, Mr. Weber? Marcus Weber. And I think we both know what I mean." His hand moved to her elbow, attempting to guide her toward the exit. "Now, if you'll please." That's when the first phone lit up. A teenage girl at a corner table with her parents gasped audibly, her Instagram feed displaying Maya's latest post from that morning. A stunning photo of her rehearsing for the tour, her face glowing under stadium lights. The girl's eyes darted between her phone and Maya, recognition dawning. Then another phone buzzed, and another. The murmurs grew louder. "Maya Bennett? The Maya Bennett? Oh my God, is that really her?" Marcus's hand froze on Maya's elbow as the whispers reached him. The color drained from his face as realization crashed over him like ice water. But it was too late. The damage was done. The hurt was real. And Maya Bennett, global superstar, voice of a generation, daughter of James Bennett, who had taught her to hold her head high no matter what, felt herself crumbling inside. Within minutes, the incident exploded across social media. A diner's shaky video captured Maya's quiet dignity in the face of discrimination, her soft voice asking what standards she hadn't met. The hashtag Maya Bennett at Blanc began trending, accompanied by clips of her latest interviews where she spoke about authenticity and self-acceptance. The juxtaposition was devastating, a young star who filled stadiums with messages of empowerment, being humiliated for simply existing in her own skin. In her car, Maya finally allowed the tears to fall. Her hands trembled as she called her father. "Daddy?" Her voice cracked, the composed performer giving way to a hurt 17-year-old girl. James Bennett heard the pain in that single word and knew immediately something was wrong. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, baby girl. Where are you?" Inside Blanc, chaos erupted. Marcus stood rooted to the spot, watching his carefully maintained world unravel. The teenage girl who had first recognized Maya approached him, phone in hand, her voice shaking with anger. "I have tickets to her concert next week. She's playing Madison Square Garden. She's Maya Bennett." The girl's mother joined her, fixing Marcus with a disappointed stare. "We've been coming here for 15 years, Marcus. This is shameful." The restaurant's owner, Richard LeBlanc IV, burst from his office, his face ashen, as he scrolled through the mounting social media storm. Phones were ringing off the hook. Journalists, regular customers, civil rights organizations. The pristine reputation his family had built over 5 decades was crumbling in real time. In their family kitchen, James Bennett held his daughter as she sobbed. "I just wanted one normal night," she whispered into his shoulder. "One dinner where I could just be me." James stroked her hair, his heart breaking for his child who had to learn, again and again, that success and fame couldn't shield her from prejudice. Maya's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Her management team was in crisis mode. The incident was being covered by major news networks. Celebrities were tweeting their support. #boycott LeBlanc was gaining momentum. But Maya couldn't focus on any of that. All she could hear was Marcus Weber's voice. "We maintain certain standards here." "They didn't even see me, Dad," she said quietly, pulling away from his embrace. "They just saw—" She gestured vaguely at herself, unable to finish the thought. James watched as something shifted in his daughter's expression, the hurt transforming into determination, the same look she'd had as a child when kids told her she couldn't be a singer because she didn't look the part. "Maybe," she said, wiping her eyes. "That's exactly the problem. They need to see, really see." She reached for her phone, scrolling through the thousands of messages of support flooding her social media. Among them were stories, hundreds of them, from people sharing similar experiences, not just at LeBlanc, but everywhere. People who had been judged, dismissed, or humiliated based on their appearance. People who didn't have millions of followers to amplify their voices. Meanwhile, at LeBlanc, Marcus sat alone in the empty restaurant, his perfectly pressed uniform feeling like a costume now. On the TV above the bar, pundits were discussing the incident, playing the video on loop. He watched himself through the shaky footage, saw his own face twisted with disdain, heard his own voice dripping with prejudice. For the first time, he saw himself as others saw him, and the reflection made him sick to his stomach. The restaurant's owners were in emergency meetings with PR firms and diversity consultants. Reservations were being canceled en masse. But beyond the immediate crisis, a deeper conversation was beginning. About privilege, about bias, about the subtle ways discrimination persisted in spaces that considered themselves too sophisticated for such behavior. Maya Bennett's quiet dinner had become a catalyst for uncomfortable but necessary truths, and no one involved would ever be quite the same. 3 days later, Maya stood outside LeBlanc again. This time, she wasn't seeking anonymity. She wore her success openly, a designer suit that spoke of confidence, her hair natural and proud, her presence undeniable, but her eyes still held that same gentleness, that same humanity that fame hadn't managed to dim. The restaurant had been closed since the incident, its windows dark, its future uncertain. Today, though, the doors would open for one crucial conversation. Inside, Marcus Weber sat at a table, his usually immaculate uniform replaced by civilian clothes that somehow made him look smaller, more human. When Maya entered, accompanied by her father, Marcus stood so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. The sound echoed through the empty restaurant like a reminder of that night. "Miss Bennett, he began, but Maya raised her hand gently. "Please," she said, taking a seat across from him. "Just Maya." James Bennett stood quietly behind his daughter, a protective presence. But this was her moment, her voice. "I've worked here for 15 years, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've prided myself on maintaining standards, on knowing our clientele." He paused, struggling with words that had never been easy for him. But watching that video, seeing myself through everyone else's eyes, I didn't recognize that person. Or maybe I finally did. Maya studied him, seeing not the man who had humiliated her, but someone grappling with his own prejudices for the first time. "Tell me, Mr. Weber, how many times have you done this before? Not to celebrities who could shine a light on it, but to ordinary people who simply walked away, carrying that hurt silently." The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken stories. Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he reached for a glass of water. "I never thought of myself as, I have black friends, He stopped, realizing how hollow the words sounded. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "I never counted. I never had to." "That's exactly the point," Maya said softly. "You never had to think about it. But we We count every time, every subtle dismissal, every mistake with our reservations, every dress code violation that somehow only applies to us. We carry each one. Richard LeBlanc IV, who had been listening quietly from the corner, stepped forward. "We're closing the restaurant for a month," he announced. "Complete overhaul, not just of policies but of culture. We want to do better. We need to do better." He turned to Maya. "And we'd like your help." Maya's response surprised them all. "No," she said firmly. "This isn't about me or about one incident. This is about every person who's ever walked through these doors feeling less than worthy. Your change needs to come from within, from really listening to your community." Over the next hour, they talked, really talked, about unconscious bias, about privilege, about the weight of small aggressions that build up over a lifetime. Marcus shared stories of his own upbringing, of assumptions he'd never questioned. Maya spoke about her experiences, both before and after fame. It wasn't easy, it wasn't comfortable, but it was necessary. 1 month later, LeBlanc reopened. The staff had undergone extensive training. New hiring practices were implemented. Community outreach programs were established. Marcus, rather than being fired as many had expected, had become an unexpected advocate for change, sharing his journey of confronting and addressing his own biases. Maya did return, this time with her father and a group of young people from a local community center, kids who might have been turned away before. They were seated at the best table, served with genuine warmth, not because of Maya's fame, but because it was the right thing to do. As she watched the young people enjoy their meal, Maya remembered her wish for anonymity from that morning in her father's kitchen. Sometimes, she realized, being seen, truly seen, was more important than being invisible. Her voice had always been her power, whether in song or in speaking truth to prejudice. That evening, as the sun set over Manhattan, Maya stood up at her table. The restaurant fell quiet, not with the tense silence of that first night, but with respectful anticipation. "When I was growing up," she began, her voice carrying to every corner, "my father taught me that music has the power to change hearts. But sometimes change comes not from grand gestures, but from small moments of recognition, when we see ourselves in others, when we acknowledge our mistakes, when we choose to grow." She raised her glass, looking directly at Marcus, who stood straighter under her gaze. "To growth," she said simply, "to change, to doing better." The words rang out like a song, like a promise, like a new beginning. The incident at LeBlanc would be remembered not just as a moment of shame, but as a catalyst for real change. Maya's world tour kicked off the following week, but she had already given her most important performance, not as a global superstar, but as a young woman standing up for dignity, for justice, and for the hope that we can all learn to see each other more clearly, more kindly, more completely. And in restaurants and businesses across the city, across the country, people began to look at their own standards, their own biases, their own reflections, because sometimes it takes one voice, one moment, one truth to open everyone's eyes to the changes we still need to make.